The coffee cup hit Marcus Webb square in the face. Hot liquid ran down his chin, soaking into his faded janitor uniform. The businessman in the Armani suit didn't even look back. "Watch where you're standing, garbage man." 200 passengers saw it happen. Flight attendants pretended not to notice. His 8-year-old daughter, Lily, clutched his hand tighter, tears forming in her eyes. "Daddy, why did he—" Marcus knelt down, coffee still dripping from his face, and whispered, "It's okay, baby. Some people can't see past the uniform." What none of them knew, not the businessman, not the flight attendants, not the pilots preparing for takeoff, was that the garbage man in seat 12F had once been the most decorated fighter pilot in U.S. military history. And in exactly 47 minutes, every single person on this plane would be begging him to save their lives. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this story, please subscribe to the channel and follow Marcus's journey to the very end. Drop a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel around the world. Marcus Webb wiped the coffee from his face with the sleeve of his uniform. The brown stains spread across the fabric like a bruise. He'd worn this uniform for 15 years. It had seen worse. "Daddy," Lily's voice was trembling, "your face is all red." "It's just coffee, sweetheart. It'll dry." "But he was mean to you." Marcus looked down at his daughter. 8 years old, brown eyes just like her mother's, hair pulled back in the ponytail he'd learned to make from YouTube videos after Sarah died. "Some people are mean," he said quietly. "That's not something we can control, but how we respond, that's ours. That's always ours." A flight attendant walked past them without a glance. Her perfume was expensive. Her indifference was free. Marcus guided Lily toward the back of the plane. "Row 12, seat F, the last row before the bathrooms." "Why do we always sit back here?" Lily asked. "Because it's the best seat on the plane." "No, it's not. The best seats are up there." She pointed toward first class, where the businessman who'd thrown the coffee was settling into his leather seat with a glass of champagne. Marcus smiled. "You think so? They have more room, and they get food, real food, not peanuts. Let me tell you a secret." Marcus leaned close to his daughter's ear. "Back here, we're closest to the engines. If anything goes wrong, I can hear it first, and if I can hear it, I can fix it." Lily frowned. "You can fix airplanes?" Marcus's smile flickered, just for a moment. "I used to know a thing or two." They settled into their seats. Marcus helped Lily with her seatbelt, then pulled out the coloring book he'd bought at the airport gift shop. It had cost $8 he didn't really have, but she'd looked at it with such longing. "Can I color the airplane first?" Lily asked. "You can color whatever you want, baby." She opened the book and began working on a cartoon jet, blue crayon, her favorite color. Marcus leaned his head back and closed his eyes. God, he was tired. He'd worked a double shift yesterday, 18 hours of mopping floors, cleaning bathrooms, emptying trash cans. His back ached. His knees screamed. His hands were cracked and dry from the industrial cleaning chemicals. But he'd made enough for these tickets. One way to San Antonio. $400 for him, $386 for Lily. His mother was dying. The call had come 3 days ago. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctor said weeks, maybe days. "Marcus." His mother's voice had been thin as paper. "I need to see her. I need to see my granddaughter before I go. I'll bring her, Mama, I promise." "How you don't have the money, son? I know you don't." "I'll find it." He'd found it. Barely. He'd sold his watch, the only thing Sarah had ever given him, to a pawn shop for $200. He'd picked up extra shifts. He'd eaten nothing but ramen for a week. And now, here they were. Seat 12F, flying toward goodbye. "Sir?" Marcus opened his eyes. A flight attendant stood in the aisle. Young, blonde, professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. Yes, I need to verify your boarding pass. Marcus frowned. I already showed it at the gate. We've had some issues with seat assignments. I just need to confirm you're in the correct row. She hadn't asked anyone else. Marcus had watched the entire boarding process. Not a single other passenger had been questioned. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the crumpled boarding pass. The flight attendant studied it like she was looking for a forgery. Webb, Marcus Webb. That's right. And this is your daughter? Yes. Do you have documentation? Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. Documentation. Proof that she's your child, a birth certificate, custody papers, she's my daughter. His voice was harder now. We have the same last name. Look at the boarding pass. Sir, I'm just following protocol. What protocol? You didn't ask anyone else for documentation. The flight attendant's smile tightened. Sir, please lower your voice. I haven't raised my voice. There's no need to be combative. I'm not being... Is there a problem here? A man appeared behind the flight attendant, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a pilot's uniform with 4 stripes on the sleeves. The captain. The flight attendant turned. Captain Morris, this passenger is being difficult about... He asked for my daughter's birth certificate. Marcus interrupted. He's the only one he asked. Captain Morris looked at Marcus, then at Lily, who had stopped coloring and was watching with wide, frightened eyes, then at the coffee stain on Marcus's uniform. Something flickered across the captain's face, something that might have been recognition, or might have been disgust. Amanda, he said to the flight attendant, let's not hold up the departure. I'm sure Mr. Webb's documentation is in order. But, sir, that will be all. The flight attendant retreated with a tight nod. Captain Morris lingered for a moment, studying Marcus with an expression that was hard to read. Enjoy your flight, Mr. Webb. Thank you. The captain walked back toward the cockpit, but at the last moment he glanced over his shoulder. Their eyes met. Something passed between them, something Marcus couldn't name. Then the cockpit door closed and Captain Morris was gone. Daddy, Lily's voice was small. Why do people keep looking at us like that? Marcus pulled his daughter close. Like what baby? Like we're not supposed to be here. The question hit him harder than the coffee had. How do you explain prejudice to an 8-year-old? How do you tell her that some people will always see the uniform before they see the man, that they'll judge the calluses on his hands before they hear the thoughts in his head? Some people, Marcus said carefully, only see what's on the outside. They see my work clothes and they think they know everything about me. They don't know that I can cook your favorite spaghetti. They don't know that I read you stories every night. They don't know that you're the best thing that ever happened to me. Lily considered this. That's dumb, she declared. Marcus laughed. It felt good to laugh. Yeah, baby, it's pretty dumb. When I grow up, I'm gonna look at people's insides, not their outsides. That's my girl. Lily went back to her coloring. Marcus watched her for a moment, the concentration on her face, the careful way she stayed inside the lines, and felt his heart crack open with love. For her, he'd given up everything. For her, he'd do it again. The plane began to taxi toward the runway. Marcus felt the familiar vibration through his seat, the rumble of engines warming up, the subtle shifts in air pressure. His body recognized these sensations the way a musician recognizes a melody. He closed his eyes and listened. Starboard engine healthy. The turbine rotation was smooth, the fuel flow steady, port engine the same. No stutters, no hesitation. Hydraulics pressurized and stable. Flaps moving through their pre-flight sequence. The sounds washed over him like a language he'd tried to forget but couldn't. 20 years ago, he'd known every whisper of an aircraft. He could diagnose a problem by ear before the instruments even registered it. That was before. Before Sarah, before Lily, before he traded a cockpit for a mop bucket. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We've been cleared for takeoff. Flight time to San Antonio will be approximately 3 hours and 15 minutes. We're expecting some light turbulence over Oklahoma, but nothing that should cause concern. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the flight. The engines roared. The plane surged forward. Marcus felt the G-forces press him back into his seat, that familiar rush of acceleration that had once been his daily companion. Lily grabbed his hand. Is it supposed to be this loud? It's just the takeoff, sweetheart. It'll quiet down once we're in the air. The wheels left the ground. The cabin tilted upward. Through the window, Marcus watched the airport shrink below them. The terminals, the runways, the parking lots full of cars belonging to people who would sleep in their own beds tonight. He wouldn't sleep in his own bed tonight. He'd sleep in a hospital chair holding his mother's hand, waiting for the end. 30 minutes into the flight, Lily fell asleep. She always slept on planes. The white noise of the engines, the gentle vibration, it knocked her out every time. Marcus adjusted the thin airline blanket around her shoulders and watched her breathe. She looked so much like Sarah in her sleep. The same curve of her cheek, the same flutter of her eyelashes. Sarah had been a nurse. They'd met when Marcus was recovering from a training accident, a hard landing that had cracked 3 ribs and bruised his ego. She'd changed his bandages and called him an idiot in the same breath. He'd fallen in love instantly. "You're a fighter pilot," she'd said on their first date. "That means you're either very brave or very stupid." "Can't I be both?" She'd laughed. God, her laugh. They'd gotten married 6 months later. A small ceremony on the beach, just family and close friends. His squadron had done a flyover in his honor, 4 F-22s, screaming across the sky in perfect formation. Sarah had cried, "But promise me something." She'd whispered that night, "Anything. Promise me you'll always come home." "I promise." But she was the one who didn't come home. Complications during childbirth, a hemorrhage that came too fast, too sudden. The doctors had done everything they could. It wasn't enough. Sarah died holding their daughter. Her last words were the baby's name. "Lily. Call her Lily, like the flowers I carried when we got married." Marcus had held his wife as she slipped away. He'd felt her heart stop beneath his palm, and something in him had stopped too. The military had offered him desk jobs, administrative positions, ways to stay in the system without ever flying again. He'd refused. "I can't be away from her," he'd told his commanding officer. "Not for deployments, not for training exercises, not for anything. Webb, you're throwing away your career. You're the best pilot we've ever seen, the best since—" "I don't care. You'll regret this. Maybe. But I'll regret leaving her more." He'd walked away from everything. The uniform, the medals, the call sign that had made him legendary, Shadow 7, the pilot who had landed a burning Raptor on a carrier deck during a hurricane. The man who had flown missions so classified that even his commanding officers didn't know the details. The legend they still taught at Top Gun. All of it gone. For 15 years, he'd mopped floors, changed light bulbs, unclogged toilets. And he'd raised his daughter. A commotion near the front of the plane pulled Marcus from his memories. Voices, sharp and urgent. "Sir, please return to your seat." "I said I want to speak to the captain." Marcus recognized the voice. The businessman in the Armani suit. The one who'd thrown the coffee. "Sir, the captain is busy flying the aircraft." "Do you know who I am? I'm Richard Thornton. Thornton Industries. We own half the airports on the eastern seaboard. I want to speak to whoever's in charge now." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. Some people never changed. They carried their entitlement like a weapon, swinging it at anyone who got in their way. "Sir, if you don't return to your seat, you'll have to call security. We're at 30,000 feet, sweetheart. What are you going to do, throw me off the plane?" The flight attendant Amanda, the one who'd questioned Marcus earlier, looked helpless. Other passengers were watching now, some with disapproval, others with the hungry interest of people hoping to witness a scene. Marcus made a decision. He unbuckled his seatbelt. "Daddy," Lily stirred. "Where are you going?" "Just to use the bathroom, baby. I'll be right back." He walked up the aisle toward the commotion. Richard Thornton was standing in the middle of the first-class cabin, his face red with anger. Amanda stood in front of him, hands raised in a placating gesture. "Mr. Thornton, please." "I've been waiting 20 minutes for my second drink. 20 minutes, this is first class. I paid $8,000 for this seat. I expect service." "Sir, we're experiencing some delays because—" "I don't care about delays, I care about my scotch." Marcus stopped a few feet away. "Hey!" Thornton turned. His eyes swept over Marcus's stained uniform with visible contempt. "What do you want, janitor?" "I want you to sit down." The cabin went quiet. Thornton laughed. It was an ugly sound. "Excuse me." "You heard me. Sit down. Let the flight attendant do her job." "And who the hell are you to tell me what to do?" "Nobody important, just a passenger who wants a quiet flight." "A passenger in economy class," Thornton sneered. "You probably saved up for a year to afford that ticket." "Something like that." "Then mind your own business, garbage man. Go back to your seat before I have you arrested when we land." Marcus didn't move. "Arrested for what? Asking you to act like an adult." Thornton's face darkened. He stepped closer to Marcus, close enough that Marcus could smell the alcohol on his breath. "Do you know what I could do to you? One phone call and I could make sure you never work again. Not at any airport in this country. I could destroy you." Marcus met his gaze. Men have tried. Something in his voice made Thornton hesitate. Just for a second, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "Is that a threat?" "It's a fact." They stood there locked in a silent standoff while the other passengers watched with bated breath. Then a voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. Please return to your seats immediately and fasten your seatbelts. We've encountered an unexpected situation. Flight attendants, prepare the cabin." The plane shuddered. Marcus felt it before anyone else did. The vibration. Wrong. All wrong. It came from the left side of the aircraft, a subtle tremor that shouldn't be there, a disruption in the smooth rhythm of the engines. His body went cold. He knew that sound. He'd heard it only once before, 23 years ago, during a training exercise over the Pacific. The engine on his wingman's jet had made that exact same sound. 30 seconds later, his wingman had been spiraling toward the ocean. "Everybody sit down," Marcus said. His voice had changed, harder, more commanding. Thornton blinked. "What?" "Sit down, now." The plane shuddered again, harder this time. A woman screamed. The lights flickered. And then the captain's voice came over the intercom, and this time there was no mistaking the fear. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have an emergency situation. Please remain calm and follow all crew instructions." Marcus was already moving. He pushed past Thornton and ran toward the front of the plane. Amanda tried to stop him. "Sir, you need to return to— Your left engine is in compressor stall. Stage 2 moving to stage 3. If they don't reduce throttle in the next 60 seconds, you're going to lose it completely." Amanda stared at him. "What? How do you—" "Just tell them," tell the captain. "Compressor stall stage 2. 60 seconds." "Sir, I can't just—" "Tell them." Something in his voice, the authority, the certainty, made her turn and run toward the cockpit. Marcus watched her go. His heart was pounding, not from fear, from something else, from the part of him he'd buried 15 years ago, the part that knew exactly what to do. Amanda pounded on the cockpit door. Captain Morris. Captain Morris, there's a passenger. He says we have a compressor stall. The door opened. First Officer Williams stood there, his face pale. How does he know that we just got the warning light? I don't know, but he said, 60 seconds. Marcus called from behind her. You have 60 seconds before stage 3. Reduce throttle to 60%, increase fuel flow to... Who the hell are you? Williams demanded. Someone who knows what he's talking about. 60% throttle. Now! Williams looked at Marcus, at his stained uniform, his calloused hands. Sir, I don't know who you think you are, but... James! Captain Morris's voice came from inside the cockpit. Do it. Captain, do it now. Williams disappeared back into the cockpit. Marcus waited, counting in his head 55, 54, 53. The plane shuddered again. 50, 49, 48. Passengers were crying now. Someone was praying in Spanish. 45. 44. Then a shift, subtle but unmistakable. The terrible vibration began to ease. 39. 38. The lights stopped flickering. 35. The engine's rhythm steadied. Marcus exhaled, ascended. The cockpit door opened again. Captain Morris stood there. His face was white, but his eyes were sharp, focused on Marcus with an intensity that felt almost physical. How did you know? I heard it. You heard it. From the passenger cabin. Before our instruments registered it. Yes. That's impossible. Marcus said nothing. Captain Morris stepped closer. His voice dropped. Who are you? Marcus looked at the captain, at the wings on his chest, at the 4 stripes on his sleeves that marked him as the commander of this aircraft. Just a passenger, Marcus said. Seat 12F. Bullshit. Morris grabbed Marcus's arm. I've been flying for 30 years. I've never seen anyone diagnose a compressor stall by ear, never. The only people who could do that are... He stopped. His grip on Marcus's arm tightened. The only people who could do that are military, fighter pilots, top tier. Marcus said nothing. Who are you? Morris demanded again. What's your name, your real name? I told you, Marcus Webb. Your call sign, then. What was your call sign? The question hung in the air. Marcus felt the weight of 15 years pressing down on him. The silence, the anonymity, the careful invisibility he'd built around himself. It doesn't matter, he said. That was a long time ago. It matters now. Morris's voice was desperate. Because we've got a bigger problem than a compressor stall. We've got a hydraulic failure in the tail section. The instruments are going crazy. My co-pilot has a head injury from the turbulence. He's barely conscious. And in about 20 minutes, we're going to have to make an emergency landing at the nearest military base. Marcus's blood went cold. What base? Edwards. They're the only ones with a runway long enough. Edwards Air Force Base. The place where Marcus had done his initial flight training. The place where Shadow 7 had been born. The problem, Morris continued, is that I can't make that landing. Not with the damage we've sustained. Not with my co-pilot out of commission. Not alone. He looked at Marcus. His eyes were pleading now. I need help. I need someone who knows what they're doing. And something tells me that person might be you. Marcus looked toward the back of the plane. Lily was there. His daughter. His everything. He'd walked away from the sky for her. Please, Morris whispered. There are 237 people on this plane. Mothers, fathers, children. They're all going to die if I can't get us down safely. Marcus closed his eyes. He thought of Sarah, of the promise he'd made. Promise me you'll always come home. He thought of Lily, of the future he wanted to give her. He thought of the 237 lives depending on what happened in the next 20 minutes. He opened his eyes. Take me to the cockpit. The cockpit was chaos. Warning lights flashed across every panel. Alarms blared. First Officer Williams was slumped in his seat, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead, barely conscious. Marcus took it all in with a single glance. "Hydraulic pressure is at 30% and dropping," Morris reported. "We've lost control of the left stabilizer. The compressor stall damaged the turbine blades. We're down to 60% thrust on that engine." Marcus slid into the co-pilot's seat. His hands moved automatically, adjusting switches, checking readings. Muscle memory. The body remembers what the mind tries to forget. "Radio status. Functional. We've been in contact with Edwards. They're clearing the runway." Weather conditions. Fog. Visibility less than half a mile. Crosswinds at 15 knots, gusting to 25. Marcus felt the old calm settling over him. The focus, the clarity. "You're going to have to talk to me," Morris said. "Tell me what you see. Tell me what to do. You're the captain, and you're the only one who can save us." Morris's voice cracked. "Please, I have a daughter too. She's 12. I promised her I'd be home for her birthday tomorrow." Marcus looked at the captain. 2 fathers, 2 daughters, one impossible situation. "Okay," Marcus said. "Here's what we're going to do." The radio crackled. "November 7749er, this is Edwards approach. We have you on radar. Confirm your status." Morris grabbed the radio. "Edwards, November 7749er. We have multiple system failures. Hydraulic emergency. Injured co-pilot requesting emergency landing clearance. November 7749er cleared for emergency approach to runway 4 left. Crash and rescue standing by." "What is your fuel status?" 40 minutes of flight time remaining." "Understood. November 7749er, we're tracking your approach. Be advised visibility is below minimums. You are cleared for a Category 3 approach." Morris turned to Marcus. "Category 3. That means—" "I know what it means." Marcus was already adjusting their heading. "It means we're landing blind. Instruments only." "Can you do it?" Marcus didn't answer. The plane descended through the clouds. Marcus watched the altimeter. 20,000 feet, 1815. "We're coming in too fast," Morris said. His voice was tight with fear. "I know. We need to lose more altitude before we can slow down. The hydraulics won't handle that kind of descent. They'll handle it long enough." "How do you know?" Marcus glanced at him. "Because I've done this before." Morris stared at him. "What?" 12 years ago. Different plane, same problem. Hydraulic failure over the Pacific during a combat exercise. "What happened?" "I landed on a carrier deck, in a hurricane." Morris's face went white. "That was you. That's the most famous emergency landing in naval history. They made it required studying at every flight school in the country." Marcus said nothing. "The pilot who did that, they called him Shadow 7. They said he was the greatest." "Focus on the approach," Marcus interrupted. "We're coming up on the final turn." But Morris couldn't let it go. "Shadow 7, you're Shadow 7. Marcus's jaw tightened. "That was a long time ago." "My God." Morris's voice was barely a whisper. "You're a legend. Every pilot in America knows your name. What happened? Why are you working as a janitor?" The question hung in the air. Marcus looked out the cockpit window at the clouds swirling around them. Somewhere behind him, 237 passengers were praying for their lives. Somewhere in seat 12, his daughter was wondering why her daddy hadn't come back from the bathroom. "I made a choice," he said quietly. "The same choice any father would make." The radio crackled again. "November 7749er, this is Edwards approach. We're picking up additional aircraft on your heading." Morris frowned. "Additional aircraft, what do you mean?" 4 contacts approaching from the southeast. Military transponders. They're requesting permission to join your formation. Marcus felt his heart stop. What squadron? His voice was barely a whisper. Stand by. November 7749er. The aircraft identify as Phantom Squadron. They're requesting permission to escort you to the runway. Phantom Squadron. Marcus closed his eyes. His squadron. The men he'd trained with. The brothers he'd left behind. November 7749er. The controller's voice was uncertain now. Do you want us to deny the escort? Morris looked at Marcus. What do you want to do? Marcus opened his eyes. Tell them yes. Morris keyed the radio. Edwards approach November 7749er. Escort approved. A moment of silence. Then November 7749er Phantom Squadron is 3 minutes out. They're requesting additional information. What information? They want to know who's flying the plane. Morris looked at Marcus. What do I tell them? The question echoed in the small cockpit. Marcus thought of everything he'd given up. The sky, the brotherhood, the identity he'd buried so deep he'd almost forgotten it existed. He thought of Lily sleeping in seat 12F, trusting her father to keep her safe. He thought of Sarah and the promise he'd made. He took a deep breath. Tell them, his voice caught. Tell them it's Shadow 7. The radio went silent for 5 seconds, 10, 15, then a burst of static and a voice Marcus hadn't heard in 15 years. Shadow 7, this is Phantom Leader. Please confirm identity. Marcus took the radio from Morris. His hand was shaking. Phantom Leader, this is Shadow 7. Confirmation code Delta Whiskey 77. The Falcon flies at midnight. Another pause. Then the voice came back, and this time it was breaking with emotion. Jesus Christ, Shadow 7, this is Phantom Leader Colonel David Chen. We thought you were dead, sir. David Chen, Marcus's wingman from 20 years ago, the man who had stood beside him at Sarah's funeral. Not dead, David, just retired. Retired to what? We lost track of you after you left. No one knew what happened. I became a janitor. Silence. A janitor. Long story. Right now I've got a plane full of people who need to get on the ground safely. Chen's voice steadied. Professional now. Copy that, Shadow 7. We're coming up on your 6. 4 F-22s full fuel ready to escort you home. Through the cockpit window, Marcus saw them emerge from the clouds. 4 F-22 Raptors, the most advanced fighter jets in the world. His jets, his squadron. They formed up around the wounded passenger plane like protective wolves around an injured member of the pack, and as they did, each pilot executed a precise wing dip. A salute. Shadow 7. Chen's voice came over the radio thick with emotion. It's an honor to fly with you again, sir. Marcus felt tears forming in his eyes. 15 years. 15 years of invisibility, of being nobody, of watching people look past him like he didn't exist. And now, here in the clouds above California, surrounded by the brotherhood he'd walked away from, he finally felt seen. The honor, he said quietly, is mine. The cockpit door was still open, and behind it, standing in the galley, Amanda, the flight attendant, had heard everything. Her face was white with shock. She turned and looked toward the back of the plane, toward seat 12F, toward the little girl who was still waiting for her father to come back from the bathroom. Amanda couldn't move. Her feet felt welded to the galley floor. Everything she'd just heard through that open cockpit door played back in her mind like a fever dream. Shadow 7, the most decorated pilot in military history, the man whose emergency landing was studied at every flight school in America, and she'd asked him for his daughter's birth certificate. She'd watched Richard Thornton throw coffee in his face and said nothing. Her hands were trembling as she reached for the intercom. She had to tell the passengers something. They were scared. Some were crying. A woman in row 8 had been praying the rosary since the turbulence started. But what could she possibly say? "Ladies and gentlemen, don't worry, the janitor is flying the plane." She pressed the button. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your cabin crew. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. We have experienced some technical difficulties, but the situation is under control. We will be making an emergency landing at Edwards Air Force Base shortly. Please follow all crew instructions." She released the button. Her voice had sounded calm, professional. Inside, she was screaming. The plane shuddered again, and Amanda grabbed the galley counter to steady herself. Through the cockpit door, she could see the back of Marcus's head. His shoulders were straight. His hands moved across the controls with a confidence that seemed almost supernatural. How had she missed it? How had everyone missed it? She thought about the way he'd walked up the aisle when Thornton was causing trouble. The way he'd spoken quiet but commanding. The way his eyes had swept the cabin like he was assessing threats. That wasn't how janitors walked. That wasn't how janitors spoke. That was how soldiers walked, how commanders spoke. Amanda had grown up on military bases. Her father was a retired Marine. She knew the look, the bearing, the unshakable calm that came from facing death and walking away. She'd seen it in Marcus Webb's eyes, and she'd ignored it. Because of his uniform, because of his calloused hands, because of the coffee stain on his chest. Shame burned in her stomach like acid. She looked toward seat 12F. The little girl was awake now. Her coloring book had fallen to the floor, and she was craning her neck trying to see toward the front of the plane. Trying to find her father. Amanda made a decision. She walked down the aisle. Passengers grabbed at her sleeves as she passed. "What's happening? Are we going to crash? I want to talk to the captain." She ignored them all. She reached row 12 and knelt beside Lily's seat. "Hi, sweetheart." Lily's eyes were wide with fear. "Where's my daddy?" "He's helping the captain fly the plane." "My daddy can't fly planes, he's a janitor." Amanda felt her throat tighten. "Your daddy," she said carefully, "is a lot of things. And right now, he's the bravest man on this airplane." Lily stared at her. "Is he going to save us?" Amanda reached out and took the little girl's hand. "Yes," she said, "he is." She hoped to God she wasn't lying. In the cockpit, Marcus had no time for hope. The hydraulic pressure was dropping faster than he'd anticipated. 22% now. In 10 minutes, maybe less, they'd lose steering completely. "Talk to me," Captain Morris said. His voice was tight. "What are you seeing?" "The tail stabilizer is starting to drift. We're losing trim control." "Can we compensate?" "For now, not for long." Marcus's hands danced across the control panel, making micro-adjustments that most pilots wouldn't even think of. Every correction bought them another few seconds, another few feet of altitude, another breath of time. The radio crackled. "Shadow 7, this is Phantom 3. I'm seeing smoke from your port engine. Confirm?" Marcus looked out the left window. A thin trail of gray was streaming from the engine nacelle. "Confirm, Phantom 3. We've got a fuel leak feeding into the turbine housing." "Jesus, you need to shut it down." "Can't. We need the thrust for the approach." "Shadow 7, if that engine catches fire." "I know what happens if it catches fire." Marcus's voice was steady. "I also know what happens if we lose thrust in a crosswind landing with damaged hydraulics. We stay the course." Silence on the radio. Then, "Copy that, Shadow 7, your call." Morris was staring at him. "You're insane." "Probably. That engine could explode. It could. Or it could hold together for another 15 minutes. We need 15 minutes." "How do you know it'll hold?" Marcus glanced at him. "I don't. Morris's face went white. Then why? Because the alternative is worse. Trust me. Trust, such a simple word, such an impossible ask, but Morris had no other choice. He nodded. Outside the cockpit windows, the 4 F-22s held formation. Their pilots were the best in the world, men and women who had trained for years, who had flown combat missions over hostile territory, who had faced death more times than they could count. And every single one of them was watching the wounded passenger plane with something like awe. Shadow 7 was back. The legend was flying again. Colonel David Chen's voice came over the radio. Shadow 7 Edwards is reporting the fog is getting worse. Visibility down to a quarter mile. They're asking if you want to divert to an alternate. Marcus checked the fuel gauge, checked the hydraulic pressure, checked the smoking engine. Negative. We don't have the fuel for an alternate. Edwards is our only option. Copy. They're lighting up every approach system they've got. Pappy lights, runway strobes, everything. They're going to guide you in like you're landing on a carrier. Marcus felt something twist in his chest. A carrier landing. That's what this would be. A precision approach with zero margin for error in conditions that would make most pilots abort. Except he couldn't abort. He couldn't go around for another try. He had one chance, one approach, one shot at getting 237 people safely on the ground. No pressure. Shadow 7, Chen's voice was hesitant now. There's something else you should know. Go ahead. Word's gotten out. About you. About who's flying that plane. Marcus closed his eyes. How? Edwards' command recognized your confirmation code. They've been tracking your situation for the last 10 minutes, and someone leaked it. Leaked it to who? Everyone, every news network in the country is carrying the story. Shadow 7 returns. It's everywhere. Marcus's grip tightened on the control yoke. 15 years of anonymity, 15 years of being invisible. Gone in an instant. Shadow 7, did you copy? I copied. I'm sorry. I know you wanted to stay off the radar. It doesn't matter now. Marcus opened his eyes. What matters is getting these people down. Copy that. We're with you all the way. The F-22s tightened their formation, their wingtips almost touching the passenger plane's fuselage. Brothers in arms, together until the end, whatever that end might be. In the passenger cabin, chaos was building. Richard Thornton had sobered up fast when the word emergency landing came over the intercom. Now he was gripping his armrests with white-knuckled hands, his Armani suit drenched in sweat. This can't be happening, he muttered. This can't be happening. The woman next to him, a grandmother from Ohio named Dorothy, gave him a look of pure contempt. Maybe if you'd been nicer to people, God would be more inclined to help. Thornton's head snapped toward her. What? That man you threw coffee at, the janitor. I saw the whole thing. Dorothy's voice was ice. You humiliated him in front of his daughter, in front of everyone, and now he's up there trying to save your miserable life. Thornton's face went pale. What are you talking about? The flight attendant told me the janitor is flying the plane. He's some kind of military pilot, a hero. Dorothy shook her head. And you treated him like garbage. Thornton looked toward the cockpit. His lips moved, but no sound came out. For the first time in his life, Richard Thornton had nothing to say. In row 15, a young mother was holding her infant son against her chest, rocking back and forth, whispering prayers in Spanish. Por favor, Dios. Por favor, mi bebé, mi bebé. Her husband held them both, his face a mask of barely controlled terror. It's going to be okay, he said. It's going to be okay, Maria. You don't know that. I have to believe it. We have to believe it. The baby started crying. A thin, reedy wail that cut through the cabin like a knife. Other passengers turned to look, some with sympathy, some with irritation. An older man, Vietnam veteran, 73 years old, had seen things that still woke him up at night. unbuckled his seatbelt and walked over. "Ma'am." Maria looked up, tears streaming down her face. "Ma'am, my name is Walter Reeves. I served 3 tours in Vietnam." He knelt beside her seat. "I've been in more close calls than I can count. Helicopters shot down, ambushes, things I can't even talk about." "Why are you telling me this?" Walter smiled, a gentle, weathered smile. "Because I'm still here, and the man flying this plane, I know his type. I've served with his type. Men like him don't lose. They don't know how to lose." He reached out and touched the baby's head. "Your son is going to grow up and have children of his own. I promise you that." Maria sobbed. "How can you promise something like that?" "Because I've been waiting to die for 50 years and it hasn't happened yet. Some of us are just too stubborn to quit." He stood up. "You hold on to that baby. You hold on to your husband and you trust the man in that cockpit. That's all you can do." He walked back to his seat. Maria looked at her husband. "Do you believe him?" Her husband tightened his arms around her. "I have to." In seat 12F, Lily was drawing. Amanda had given her a napkin and a pen, and the little girl was sketching something with intense concentration. Her tongue stuck out of the corner of her mouth the way it always did when she was focused. "What are you drawing, sweetheart?" Amanda asked. She was sitting in the empty seat next to Lily, holding the little girl's free hand. "My daddy." Amanda looked at the napkin, a stick figure in a rectangle that might have been a cockpit, wings on either side, a big smile on the stick figure's face. "That's beautiful. He's flying the plane." Lily's voice was matter-of-fact. "He told me he used to know how to fly. I didn't believe him, but I believe him now. Your daddy is very special." "I know." Lily added another detail to her drawing, a tiny figure in the seat behind the pilot. "That's me. I'm his co-pilot." Amanda felt tears welling in her eyes. "You sure are, sweetheart. You sure are." The cockpit was getting hot. Marcus could feel sweat trickling down his back. The damaged systems were struggling to maintain climate control, and the stress of the approach was taking its toll. But he barely noticed. His entire world had narrowed to 3 things: the instruments in front of him, the sound of the engines, and the voice in his headset. "Shadow 7, this is Edwards Tower. You're 5 miles out. Begin descent to 3,000 feet. Runway 4 left is clear. Crash and rescue standing by." "Copy, Tower. Beginning descent." Marcus pushed the yoke forward gently. The plane's nose dipped. The altimeter began to spin. 10,000 feet, 8,000, 6. "Hydraulic pressure at 15%, Morris reported. His voice was barely a whisper. "I see it. We're not going to have enough to—" "I know." "Then what? Manual override." Marcus's voice was calm. "When the hydraulics fail completely, I'm going to switch to manual control. It's going to take everything we've got to keep the nose up, but it's possible. Manual control on a plane this size, that's our only option." Morris stared at him. "Have you ever done that before?" "No." "Then how do you know it'll work?" Marcus looked at him. "I don't." Morris's hands were shaking. "How are you so calm? We're about to die. We're all about to die, and you're sitting there like you're ordering coffee." Marcus was quiet for a moment, then he said, "When my wife was dying, when she was lying in that hospital bed, bleeding out, knowing she'd never see our daughter grow up, she looked at me with the calmest eyes I'd ever seen. And she smiled. She actually smiled." His voice cracked slightly. "I asked her how. How could she be so calm when everything was falling apart? And she said, because panic doesn't change anything. The only thing I can control is how I spend these last few minutes. And I choose to spend them loving you." Morris said nothing. "That's how I stay calm," Marcus continued. "I can't control whether this plane makes it to the ground safely. But I can control what I do in these next few minutes. I can give these people my best, my absolute best. And if that's not enough..." He took a breath. "Then at least I'll know I tried." The radio crackled. "Shadow 7, this is Phantom Leader. We're going to peel off at 1,000 feet. We can't follow you below that altitude." "Understood, Phantom Leader. It's been an honor flying with you, sir. Whatever happens." "The honor was mine, David. Thank you for everything." "See you on the ground, Shadow 7, one way or another." The 4 F-22s began to pull away, their engines roaring as they climbed back into the clouds. Marcus watched them go. 20 years ago, he'd been one of them. Part of the Brotherhood. Part of something bigger than himself. He'd walked away from all of it. For Lily, for the life he'd chosen. He didn't regret it, not for a second, but God, it felt good to fly again. "Shadow 7, Edwards Tower. You're 1 mile out, runway in sight." Marcus peered through the fog. Nothing, nothing, nothing. Then a faint glow, red and white lights cutting through the gray. "Runway in sight! You're cleared to land, Shadow 7. Good luck!" Marcus gripped the yoke. "Gear down!" Morris pulled the lever, a grinding sound, a shudder. "Gear down and locked. Flaps to 30 degrees. 30 degrees, hydraulic pressure at 8%. 8%. They had maybe 90 seconds before total failure. "I'm taking us in." The plane descended through the fog. 500 feet, 400, 3. The runway lights grew brighter, clearer. 200 feet. Warning alarms blared, red lights flashed across every panel. "Hydraulics failing," Morris shouted. "We're losing it. Switch to manual." Marcus grabbed the yoke with both hands. The resistance was immediate, like trying to steer a car without power steering, but 1,000 times worse. His arms screamed, his shoulders burned. 100 feet, the plane was drifting left. The crosswind was pushing them toward the edge of the runway. "Come on," Marcus growled. "Come on. 50 feet. 20, 10. The wheels touched asphalt. The plane bounced, shuddered. The left wing dipped dangerously close to the ground. Marcus fought the controls, every muscle in his body strained against the failing systems. "Stay with me," he whispered. "Stay with me." The nose came down. The wheels caught. The plane began to slow, but they were still going too fast, still drifting left. Emergency vehicles raced alongside, sirens wailing. Marcus pressed his feet against the rudder pedals. Nothing. The hydraulics were completely gone. "Reverse thrust," he shouted. "Now!" Morris yanked the levers. The engines roared in protest. The plane shuddered violently. 2,000 feet of runway left. 1,500. Marcus could see the end of the runway coming, the grass beyond, the fence, if they didn't stop. He closed his eyes. "Sarah, Lily, I'm sorry." The plane stopped. 50 feet from the end of the runway, 50 feet from disaster. Silence. Complete, absolute silence. Then Captain Morris let out a sound, something between a sob and a laugh. "We made it! We made it!" Marcus didn't move. His hands were still locked on the yoke. His arms were shaking uncontrollably. "Shadow 7, Edwards Tower. That was the most incredible landing I've ever seen. Welcome home, sir. Welcome home." The cockpit door burst open. Amanda stood there, tears streaming down her face. "Is it over? Are we—" "We're down," Morris said. "We're safe." A roar erupted from the passenger cabin. Cheers, sobs, applause. Marcus finally released the yoke. His hands were cramped into claws. He could barely straighten his fingers. But he didn't care. They were alive. All 237 of them. They were alive. "Daddy!" The voice came from behind Amanda. Marcus turned. Lily stood in the galley, her napkin drawing clutched in her hand. Her eyes were wide. Her lip was trembling. "Daddy, did you really fly the plane?" Marcus pushed himself out of the co-pilot's seat. His legs nearly gave out beneath him, but he caught himself on the doorframe. He knelt down. Yeah, baby, Daddy flew the plane. Why didn't you tell me you could do that? Marcus felt tears spilling down his cheeks. 15 years of silence, 15 years of secrets, 15 years of being invisible. I didn't think it mattered anymore. Lily threw her arms around his neck. You're a superhero, Daddy. You're a real superhero. Marcus held his daughter tight. Outside the cockpit windows, he could see emergency vehicles surrounding the plane. Fire trucks, ambulances, military personnel running toward the aircraft. His past was about to collide with his present. His anonymity was over. His life would never be the same. But in this moment, none of that mattered. He had his daughter in his arms. He had brought her safely to the ground, and somewhere up there beyond the fog and the clouds, he knew Sarah was smiling. The door of the aircraft opened. Sunlight streamed in, bright, blinding, overwhelming. And waiting at the bottom of the stairs, standing at attention in perfect formation, was a row of uniformed officers. They raised their hands to their foreheads. Every single one of them, saluting the janitor from seat 12F. Marcus couldn't feel his legs. He stood at the top of the aircraft stairs, Lily's hand, gripping his, and looked down at the row of uniformed officers holding their salutes. Behind them, fire trucks and ambulances formed a corridor of flashing lights. Beyond that, he could see news vans, helicopters circling overhead, cameras pointed at the plane like weapons. His past had found him. Daddy! Lily tugged his hand. Why are all those people looking at us? Marcus swallowed hard. They're just glad we're safe, baby. But why are they doing that thing with their hands? It's called a salute. It's how soldiers say thank you. Are you a soldier? The question hit him like a punch to the chest. I used to be. A man broke from the formation and walked toward the stairs. 4 stars on his shoulders, general's insignia, gray hair cropped short, a face Marcus recognized from a lifetime ago. General William Hayes, commander of Edwards Air Force Base, the man who had pinned the Distinguished Flying Cross on Marcus's chest 22 years ago. Hayes stopped at the bottom of the stairs and looked up. Shadow 7. Marcus's throat tightened. General, you look like hell, son. It's been a long day, sir. Hayes's face cracked into something that might have been a smile. That was the most impossible landing I've ever witnessed. You brought that plane down with 0 hydraulics, 1 engine smoking in fog so thick we couldn't see our own hands. The engineers are saying it shouldn't have been possible. It wasn't impossible, sir. Just difficult. Difficult. Hayes shook his head. 20 years ago, you were the most arrogant pilot I'd ever met. I see that hasn't changed. With respect, sir, it's not arrogance if you can back it up. Hayes laughed, a genuine surprised laugh. God, I've missed you. He climbed the first few stairs and extended his hand. Welcome back, Shadow 7. Welcome home. Marcus shook the general's hand. The grip was firm, familiar. It felt like shaking hands with his own past. I'm not back, sir. I'm just passing through. Hayes's eyes flickered to Lily. This must be your daughter. Lily, she's 8. Hayes knelt down to Lily's level. Hello, young lady. Your father just saved 237 lives. That makes him a hero. Do you know what that means? Lily considered this seriously. Does it mean he gets ice cream? Hayes burst out laughing. I think it means he gets whatever he wants. He stood and looked at Marcus. We need to talk. There are complications. Complications? The press knows everything. Your identity, your service record, the fact that you've been working as a janitor for 15 years. It's all over the news. Hayes's expression darkened. And there are people who have questions. A lot of questions. Marcus felt his stomach drop. What kind of questions? Before Hayes could answer, a commotion erupted at the bottom of the stairs. Voices shouting, camera flashes exploding. Mr. Webb! Mr. Webb over here! Shadow 7, can you tell us what happened? How does it feel to be a hero? Marcus instinctively pulled Lily behind him. I need to get my daughter out of here. Already handled. Hayes signaled to a pair of military police officers. They'll escort you to a secure location. We have a car waiting. I don't want a secure location. I want to get to San Antonio. My mother is dying. Hayes's face softened. I know. I read your file, pancreatic cancer stage 4. Then you know I don't have time for interviews and press conferences. The press conference isn't optional, I'm afraid. The Secretary of Defense himself is flying in. He wants to meet the man who just performed a miracle at 30,000 feet. Sir, 2 hours. Give me 2 hours and I'll have you on a military transport to San Antonio. You'll be at your mother's bedside before midnight. Marcus looked at his daughter, at the chaos surrounding them, at the general who held the power to make his life very easy or very difficult. He didn't have a choice. 2 hours. Thank you. Hayes put a hand on Marcus's shoulder. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I'm sorry you had to come back like this, but I'm also grateful. Those passengers, they're alive because of you. Marcus said nothing. He took Lily's hand and followed the military police officers down the stairs, through the gauntlet of cameras and shouting reporters toward the waiting car. The door closed behind them and suddenly it was quiet. Lily climbed into his lap and wrapped her arms around his neck. Daddy. Yeah, baby. I'm proud of you. Marcus held her tight. He couldn't remember the last time anyone had said those words to him. The secure location turned out to be a conference room in the base's administrative building. Someone had brought water coffee sandwiches. Lily was coloring on the back of official military documents, completely unbothered by the chaos swirling around her. Marcus sat in a metal chair and stared at the wall. His hands were still trembling. The adrenaline was wearing off, and in its place came exhaustion so profound he could barely keep his eyes open. The door opened. Captain Morris walked in. He'd cleaned up the blood on his uniform, had been wiped away, and someone had given him a fresh shirt, but his eyes were still haunted. Webb! Marcus looked up. Captain. Morris stood there for a moment uncertain. Then he crossed the room and held out his hand. I don't know how to thank you. I don't know if it's even possible to thank you. Marcus shook his hand. You don't have to thank me. I did what anyone would have done. Bullshit! Morris's voice cracked. No one else could have done what you did. The engineers have been going over the flight data. They said the approach you used, the manual corrections, the throttle adjustments, the way you compensated for the wind shear. They've never seen anything like it. They said it was like watching someone speak a language that doesn't exist. It exists. I just forgot I knew it. Morris sat down heavily in the chair across from Marcus. I have a daughter. Did I tell you that? You mentioned it. She's 12. Her name is Sophie. She plays soccer terribly, but she loves it anyway. She's obsessed with this boy band I've never heard of. She rolls her eyes every time I try to tell her a joke. Morris's voice was thick. I was supposed to be home for her birthday tomorrow. I thought when those alarms started going off, when the plane started shaking, I thought I'd never see her again. But you will. Because of you. Morris looked at Marcus with something like reverence. I've been flying for 30 years. I thought I was good. I thought I was one of the best. And then I watched you work and I realized I don't know anything. You're not just a pilot, Webb. You're something else entirely. Marcus was quiet. I was something else, he finally said. A long time ago. Now I'm just a janitor who got lucky. Lucky. Morris laughed bitterly. Luck had nothing to do with what happened up there. That was skill. That was instinct. That was 20 years of training compressed into 15 minutes of pure execution. It's not something I wanted to remember. Morris frowned. What do you mean? Marcus looked at Lily, still coloring peacefully across the room. When I walked away from the military, I walked away completely. I didn't want to think about flying. I didn't want to remember what it felt like to be Shadow 7. I wanted to be ordinary, anonymous, just a dad who worked hard and came home every night. Why? Because being Shadow 7 cost me everything. Marcus's voice dropped to a whisper. I missed my wife's death because I was on a mission so classified I couldn't even tell her where I was going. She went into labor early, and by the time they reached me, she was already gone. Morris went pale. Oh God. I held my daughter for the first time in a hospital morgue, standing next to my wife's body. Marcus's eyes were dry, but his voice was raw. So when they offered me desk jobs, administrative positions, ways to keep serving while staying home, I couldn't. I couldn't look at a uniform without seeing Sarah's face. I couldn't hear an engine without thinking about all the times I chose the sky over her. So you became a janitor. I became invisible. That's what I wanted. To disappear, to be nobody. Morris was silent for a long moment. But you couldn't stay invisible forever. No. Marcus looked toward the window. Outside, he could see news helicopters still circling. No, I couldn't. The door burst open. A young officer rushed in, his face flushed with urgency. Mr. Webb, General Hayes needs you immediately. Marcus stood. What's wrong? There's been a development regarding one of the passengers. What kind of development? The officer hesitated. Richard Thornton, the businessman from first class. He's holding an impromptu press conference outside the terminal. He's saying things. Marcus felt his blood run cold. What things? You need to see for yourself, sir. Marcus looked at Lily. Stay here with Captain Morris, baby. I'll be right back. Okay, Daddy. He followed the officer out the door and down the hallway. The conference room at the end of the corridor had a television mounted on the wall. A dozen officers were gathered around it, watching with expressions of disbelief and anger. On the screen, Richard Thornton stood behind a cluster of microphones. His Armani suit was wrinkled. His hair was disheveled. But his voice was strong, confident, dripping with entitlement. And I want to make something very clear. This so-called hero, this Marcus Webb, is a fraud. I watched him throughout the entire flight. He was aggressive, confrontational, and frankly dangerous. He approached me in the first-class cabin and threatened me physically. Marcus's hands clenched into fists. That's a lie. I believe, Thornton continued on the screen, that Mr. Webb may have actually caused the emergency situation in order to create an opportunity for himself. Think about it, a washed-up pilot working as a janitor, desperate for attention. What better way to revive his career than to manufacture a crisis? A reporter shouted a question. Mr. Thornton, are you saying Marcus Webb sabotaged the plane? Thornton held up his hands with false modesty. I'm not saying anything definitively. I'm simply asking questions. Questions that deserve answers. I've already spoken with my lawyers, and we're considering legal action against Mr. Webb and the airline for the trauma I experienced today. General Hayes appeared beside Marcus. You see what we're dealing with? He threw coffee in my face. Marcus's voice was barely controlled. He harassed the flight crew. He was drunk and belligerent, and now he's accusing me of sabotage. He's a billionaire. He has powerful friends, and right now he's controlling the narrative. The narrative? Marcus turned to the general. I saved his life. I saved everyone's life. And he's standing there on national television calling me a fraud. Welcome to the modern world, son. Truth doesn't matter as much as it used to. What matters is who tells the story first and who tells it loudest. On the screen, Thornton was still talking. I've been informed that Mr. Webb has a history of erratic behavior. He left the military under mysterious circumstances. He's been unemployed for extended periods. Is this really the kind of person we should be celebrating as a hero? Marcus felt something snap inside him. I'm going out there. That's exactly what he wants. I don't care what he wants. Webb. Hayes grabbed his arm. Think about your daughter. Think about what happens if you confront him on camera and lose your temper. I'm not going to lose my temper. You're already losing it. I can see it in your eyes. Marcus forced himself to take a breath. Then what do you suggest? Before Hayes could answer, the television screen flickered. The image split in two. On one side, Thornton continued his tirade. On the other, a new feed appeared. A woman's face. Fierce, intelligent, beautiful. Graying hair pulled back in a severe bun. Eyes that could cut through steel. Marcus's heart stopped. The banner at the bottom of the screen read, Senator Elizabeth Chen, live response to Thornton claims. David Chen's mother. The woman who had been like a second mother to Marcus during his years in the military. The woman he hadn't spoken to in 15 years. My fellow Americans. Senator Chen began, her voice calm but deadly. I've just listened to Richard Thornton's statement and I feel compelled to respond. The room went silent. I served on the Armed Services Committee for 23 years. I have access to classified files that Mr. Thornton could never dream of seeing. And I can tell you without hesitation that Marcus Webb, call sign Shadow 7, is one of the most decorated pilots in the history of the United States military. Thornton, on the other half of the screen, looked like he'd been slapped. His service record includes 17 classified missions that I am not at liberty to discuss. His emergency landing on a carrier deck during Hurricane Miranda. Is studied at every flight school in the free world. He has saved more lives than most people will ever meet in their lifetimes. Senator Chen leaned toward the camera. As for Mr. Thornton's suggestion that Shadow 7 somehow sabotaged the aircraft, I have spoken personally with the engineering team at Edwards Air Force Base. The mechanical failure was caused by a manufacturing defect in the port engine. It had nothing to do with any passenger. The suggestion otherwise is not only absurd, it's defamatory. Thornton's lawyer was whispering urgently in his ear. Furthermore, Senator Chen continued, I have been informed that Mr. Thornton's behavior on the flight was erratic and disruptive. Multiple witnesses have come forward describing him as intoxicated, verbally abusive, and physically aggressive toward other passengers, including Mr. Webb himself. The reporter asked, Senator, are you saying Mr. Thornton's statements are false? I'm saying Mr. Thornton is a man who just had his life saved by someone he treated with contempt, and instead of showing gratitude, he's attempting to destroy that person's reputation. I'll leave it to the American people to draw their own conclusions. She paused. Marcus Webb gave up everything, his career, his prestige, his entire identity to raise his daughter as a single father. He has spent 15 years doing honest work, asking nothing from anyone, and today when his country needed him, he answered the call. That's not a fraud, that's a hero. The screen went dark. The room erupted in murmurs and movement. General Hayes looked at Marcus with something like wonder. Elizabeth Chen just ended Richard Thornton's public life in 90 seconds. Marcus couldn't speak. He hadn't seen Senator Chen since Sarah's funeral. He'd cut off contact with everyone from his past, everyone who reminded him of the life he'd walked away from. But she'd remembered him. She'd defended him. The door opened. A staff sergeant entered looking slightly dazed. General Hayes, sir. Senator Chen is on the phone. She's asking to speak with Mr. Webb. Hayes raised an eyebrow at Marcus. You going to take that call? Marcus's throat was dry. I don't know what to say to her. You could start with thank you. Marcus walked to the phone on the conference table. His hand was shaking as he picked up the receiver. Senator Chen. Marcus? Her voice was warm, maternal, exactly how he remembered it. It's been too long. Yes, ma'am, it has. I watched the footage of your landing. David sent it to me before it hit the news. He was crying. I've never seen my son cry, not since he was a child. Marcus closed his eyes. I didn't ask for any of this. No, you never did. That's what made you special. She paused. I know why you left, Marcus. I know about Sarah. I know about the guilt you've been carrying all these years. Senator. Elizabeth. Call me Elizabeth. I've known you since you were a scared 22-year-old with too much talent and not enough sense. Elizabeth. The name felt strange on his tongue. I don't deserve what you just did for me. You deserve far more than that, and we both know it. Her voice softened. How's Lily? Marcus looked toward the door. Somewhere down the hall, his daughter was coloring on classified documents, completely unaware that her life was about to change forever. She's perfect. She's the best thing I've ever done. Sarah would be proud of you. The words hit him like a physical blow. I don't know about that. I do. I knew Sarah. Remember, I was at your wedding. I saw the way she looked at you. She would be so proud of the father you've become. Marcus felt tears burning in his eyes. Why are you doing this? After everything, after I disappeared, after I cut off contact with everyone, why are you helping me? Because you're family, Marcus. You always were, and family doesn't abandon each other no matter how far they run. He couldn't speak. The Secretary of Defense will be there in an hour, Elizabeth continued. He's going to offer you your commission back, full reinstatement, a position at the Naval Academy training the next generation of pilots. I can't. Don't answer now. Just think about it. You've spent 15 years being invisible. Maybe it's time to let people see you again. And if I don't want to be seen, then that's your choice. But Marcus, her voice grew serious. Your daughter is going to find out who you really are. The whole world knows now. She's going to have questions, and you're going to have to decide how to answer them. He hadn't thought about that. He'd been so focused on surviving the landing, on protecting Lily from the chaos, he hadn't considered what came next. The questions, the scrutiny, the impossible task of explaining to an 8-year-old why her father had hidden an entire life from her. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. No one does. You figure it out as you go. Elizabeth's voice was gentle now. That's what parenting is. That's what life is. You just keep moving forward and hope you don't screw it up too badly. Marcus laughed despite himself. That doesn't sound very reassuring. It's not meant to be reassuring. It's meant to be honest. She paused. I have to go. The press is hounding me for follow-up statements. But Marcus, call David. He's been waiting 15 years to hear your voice. I will. Promise me. I promise. Good. He could hear the smile in her voice. And Marcus, welcome back. We missed you. The line went dead. Marcus stood there for a long moment, holding the receiver, feeling the weight of 15 years pressing down on him. Welcome back. But where was he coming back to? The military? The brotherhood? The identity he'd buried so deep he'd almost forgotten it existed, or something else entirely. The door opened. Lily stood there, Captain Morris behind her. Daddy. Her voice was small. The man on TV said you're a fraud. What's a fraud? Marcus felt his heart shatter into 1,000 pieces. He knelt down and took his daughter's hands. A fraud is someone who pretends to be something they're not. Are you a fraud? No, baby, I'm not. Then why did he say that? Marcus struggled for words. Sometimes people say things that aren't true. Sometimes they're scared or angry, or they don't understand what really happened. And when they're scared, they look for someone to blame. Lily considered this. Like when Tommy Peterson blamed me for breaking the window, but it was really his fault because he threw the ball too hard. Marcus laughed softly. Yeah, baby, exactly like that. That's not very nice. No, it's not. Lily threw her arms around his neck. I don't care what that man said. I know you're not a fraud. You're my daddy, and you saved everyone. Marcus held her tight. I love you, Lily. I love you too, Daddy. Behind them, General Hayes cleared his throat. Mr. Webb, the Secretary of Defense has just landed. He's requesting your presence in the main hangar. Marcus stood, lifting Lily in his arms. Tell the Secretary I'll be there in 5 minutes. Sir, he's not a patient man. 5 minutes. Hayes hesitated, then nodded. 5 minutes. He left. Marcus carried Lily to the window and looked out at the runway where he'd landed the plane just hours ago. The aircraft was still there, surrounded by maintenance crews and investigators. From here it looked small, fragile. It was hard to believe that something so fragile had carried 237 lives through the impossible. Daddy. Yeah, baby. When we get to Grandma's house, can you tell me about when you used to fly planes, the real stories, not the pretend ones? Marcus felt tears spilling down his cheeks. The real stories, the ones he'd never told anyone, the missions, the near misses, the friends he'd lost, the man he used to be. Yeah, baby, he whispered. I'll tell you everything. He kissed the top of her head. Then he carried her out the door toward whatever came next. The Secretary of Defense was not what Marcus expected. James Mitchell was 63 years old, built like a linebacker with hands that looked like they could crush walnuts. He'd served 3 tours in Desert Storm before entering politics. He still walked like a soldier. He was also crying. Shadow 7. Mitchell strode across the hangar and grabbed Marcus's hand with both of his. My God, son. My God. Marcus didn't know what to say. I watched the footage. Mitchell continued, his voice thick. 17 times. I watched it 17 times. The engineers say what you did was impossible. The physics don't work. The margins were too small, and yet here you are. Here I am. Do you know what you've done? Do you have any idea? I landed a plane, sir. You gave people hope. Mitchell's grip tightened. In a world full of cynicism and division, you reminded everyone what heroism looks like. Not the movie kind, the real kind, the kind that doesn't ask for credit or recognition, the kind that just does what needs to be done. Lily tugged at Marcus's sleeve. Daddy, who is this man? Mitchell looked down at the little girl. His face softened. I'm someone who works for the president, sweetheart, and I came here to tell your daddy something very important. What? Mitchell knelt down to her level. I came to tell him that he's one of the bravest men in America, and that his country is very, very proud of him. Lily beamed. I know. He's my daddy. Mitchell laughed, a genuine, surprised laugh. You've raised a good one, Webb. She raised herself mostly. I just tried to stay out of the way. Mitchell stood and gestured for Marcus to follow him away from the crowd of officials and officers. I need to speak with you privately. Marcus handed Lily to Captain Morris, who had followed them to the hangar. Stay with Captain Morris, baby. I'll be right back. You keep saying that, Lily complained. But you keep leaving. I know. Last time I promise. He followed Mitchell to a quiet corner of the hangar. The secretary's expression changed. The warmth faded. Something harder took its place. I'm going to be direct with you, Webb. I don't have time for politics. I appreciate that, sir. The president wants to give you the Medal of Honor. Marcus blinked. What? The Medal of Honor? The highest military decoration in the United States. You'd be the first person in 40 years to receive it for actions during peacetime. Sir, I'm not in the military anymore. I'm a janitor. We can fix that. Full reinstatement, back pay, a position at the Naval Academy. Mitchell paused. The president wants to announce it tomorrow, a ceremony at the White House, live television, the whole country watching. Marcus felt the walls closing in. I can't do that. Can't or won't. My mother is dying. She's in San Antonio. I need to be with her. Mitchell's face softened slightly. We can delay the ceremony. It's not about the ceremony. Marcus's voice was harder than he intended. I left the military for a reason. I didn't want this life anymore. I didn't want the attention, the pressure, the constant scrutiny. I wanted to be a father. Just a father. And you've been a father for 15 years, but Webb... Mitchell stepped closer. The world needs heroes, real heroes, not movie stars playing soldiers, not athletes selling sneakers. Men like you. Men who've actually done something. I'm not a hero. 237 people disagree. Marcus looked away. I just did what anyone would have done. No. Mitchell's voice was firm. That's the lie you tell yourself. Most people would have stayed in their seats. Most people would have trusted the professionals. You stood up. You took control. You saved lives. He paused. That's not ordinary. That's not common. That's heroism. Marcus didn't respond. I'm not asking you to decide right now, Mitchell continued. Take the night. Be with your mother. But think about it. Think about what you could mean to people. What your story could inspire. My story. Marcus turned back to face him. My story is about a man who missed his wife's death because he was too busy being a hero. My story is about a man who chose the sky over his family and has spent 15 years trying to make up for it. That's not inspiring. That's a warning. Mitchell was quiet for a long moment. Sarah Webb. Marcus went still. I read the file, Mitchell said softly. I know what happened. The mission in Azerbaijan, the communication blackout. By the time they reached you, she'd been gone for 6 hours. Don't. I also read the commendation, the one they gave you for that mission. You saved 47 hostages that night. American journalists, aid workers, diplomats, 47 people who went home to their families because of you. And I lost my wife. Yes, you did. Mitchell's voice was gentle now. And that's a tragedy. A genuine tragedy. But Webb, do you really think Sarah would want you to spend the rest of your life hiding? Do you think she'd want you to bury everything you are because of guilt? You didn't know her. No. But I know people, and I know that loving someone means wanting the best for them, even after you're gone. Mitchell put a hand on Marcus's shoulder. You've been punishing yourself for 15 years. Maybe it's time to stop. Marcus felt something crack inside him. The armor he'd built, the walls he'd constructed, the careful invisibility he'd maintained for so long, it was all starting to crumble. The military transport to San Antonio leaves in 30 minutes, Mitchell said. You and your daughter will have seats. A car will be waiting to take you to the hospital. He stepped back. I'll be in touch about the ceremony, but no pressure. Whatever you decide, your country owes you a debt it can never repay. He walked away, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts. The C-17 was louder than a commercial aircraft, but Lily slept through the noise anyway. She was curled up in Marcus's lap, her head against his chest, her breath slow and even. The coloring book was still clutched in her hand. Marcus watched her sleep and tried to make sense of everything that had happened. This morning, he'd been a janitor. Invisible, anonymous, just another face in the crowd. Now he was being offered the Medal of Honor. The irony wasn't lost on him. You look like you're carrying the weight of the world. Marcus looked up. An older man was sitting across from him, one of the flight crew, judging by his uniform. Weathered face, kind eyes, silver hair. Just thinking, Marcus said. Thinking's dangerous, especially after a day like yours. The man extended his hand. Master Sergeant Frank Rodriguez. I've been flying transports for 30 years. Marcus Webb. Oh, I know who you are. Everyone on this base knows who you are. Rodriguez smiled. My grandson wants to be a pilot. He's 12. When I told him I was going to be on the same plane as Shadow 7, he about lost his mind. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. I'm not Shadow 7 anymore. With respect, sir, that's bullshit. Rodriguez's voice was gentle but firm. Call signs don't expire. You earned yours. It's part of you. I walked away from it. You walked away from the military. That's not the same thing. Rodriguez leaned forward. My father served in Korea. He never talked about it, not once, 50 years of silence. And on his deathbed, you know what he told me? Marcus shook his head. He said the silence was heavier than anything he'd carried in combat. He said he wished he'd talked about it, shared it, let people in. Rodriguez's eyes were wet. He said the worst thing you can do is try to forget who you are. Marcus looked down at Lily. I didn't want her to grow up in the shadow of my past. She's not in your shadow, sir. She's in your light. Rodriguez stood. We'll be landing in about an hour. San Antonio General Hospital, right? How did you know? General Hayes briefed the crew. We're going to get you there as fast as humanly possible. Rodriguez saluted. It's an honor to serve you, Shadow 7, whatever you call yourself. He walked away. Marcus held his daughter closer and watched the darkness outside the window. Somewhere down there, his mother was waiting. He hoped he wasn't too late. The hospital corridor smelled like disinfectant and despair. Marcus carried Lily through the halls following a nurse who walked too fast and spoke too softly. It was past midnight. The lights were dimmed. Most of the doors they passed were closed. She's been asking for you, the nurse said. All day. She saw you on the news. Marcus's chest tightened. How long does she have? The nurse hesitated. The doctors can explain. How long? Days. Maybe hours. It's hard to say. She stopped outside a room at the end of the corridor. She's awake, but she's weak. Don't expect too much. Marcus nodded. He looked at Lily, who was rubbing her eyes. Baby, we're going to see Grandma now. She's very sick. She might look different than you remember. Different how? Just tired. Very tired. But she loves you. She loves you so much. Lily nodded solemnly. I made her a picture on the airplane, of you flying the plane. Do you think she'll like it? Marcus felt tears burning in his eyes. She'll love it, baby. He pushed open the door. The room was dim. A single lamp cast a pale glow over the bed. Medical equipment beeped and hummed. The smell of medicine hung heavy in the air. And there, propped up against pillows, was Eleanor Webb. She looked smaller than Marcus remembered. Thinner. Her skin was paper white, her hair reduced to wisps. The cancer had taken so much from her. But her eyes were still sharp, still fierce, still the eyes of the woman who had raised him alone, who had worked 3 jobs to keep him fed, who had driven him to his first flight lesson in a car held together by prayer and duct tape. Marcus. Her voice was barely a whisper. My boy. Marcus crossed the room in 3 steps and knelt beside her bed. Mama, I saw you on the news. A smile flickered across her face. You flew that plane like you were born in the sky. I was born in a hospital in Houston, Mama. You were there. Smart mouth. Her hand reached out trembling and touched his face. You look tired? It's been a long day. I heard. Her eyes moved to Lily. Is that my granddaughter hiding behind your legs? Lily peeked out. Hi, Grandma. Come here, sweet girl. Let me see you. Marcus lifted Lily onto the bed, careful not to disturb the tubes and wires. Eleanor's face transformed. The pain, the exhaustion, it all melted away. What remained was pure radiant love. Look at you. You're so big, you're so beautiful. Her voice cracked. You look just like your mother. Daddy says that too. Your daddy is a smart man. Eleanor looked at Marcus. Usually. Marcus laughed despite himself. Mama, hush, let me enjoy my granddaughter. Eleanor pulled Lily closer. Did you have a good flight, sweetheart? It was scary at first, but then Daddy fixed everything. That's what your daddy does. He fixes things. Eleanor's eyes met Marcus's. Even things that don't want to be fixed. The words hung in the air. Marcus knew what she meant. She'd always known about the guilt he carried, the weight of Sarah's death, the self-imposed exile from everything he'd once been. Grandma, Lily held up the crumpled napkin. I made you a picture. Eleanor took it with trembling hands. It's beautiful, sweetheart. Tell me about it. That's Daddy in the cockpit, and that's me behind him. I'm his co-pilot. You're his co-pilot. Uh-huh. The lady on the plane said so. Eleanor looked at the crude drawing stick figures in a rectangle, wings on the side, and tears began streaming down her face. This is the most beautiful picture I've ever seen. Really, really. She pressed it against her heart. I'm going to keep it forever. Even in heaven. The question hit Marcus like a punch. Eleanor didn't flinch. Especially in heaven, sweetheart. I'll show it to all the angels. Lily beamed. Daddy, can I stay with Grandma for a while? Marcus nodded, unable to speak. Lily curled up next to Eleanor, careful of the tubes, and began telling her about the plane, the landing, the fire trucks, everything. Her voice filled the quiet room like music, and Marcus watched his mother hold his daughter, and he understood something he'd been too blind to see for 15 years. This was what mattered. Not medals, not glory, not the respect of generals or the admiration of strangers. This family, love. The connections that held you together when everything else fell apart. He'd spent so long running from his past that he'd almost missed his present. An hour later, Lily was asleep. She'd curled up in the chair next to Eleanor's bed, wrapped in a hospital blanket, her napkin drawing still clutched in her hand. Eleanor was watching her with an expression Marcus couldn't quite name. She's perfect, Marcus. I know. You did good with her. You did good. Mama, let me finish. Eleanor's voice was weak but firm. I know you've been punishing yourself. I know you think you failed Sarah, but Marcus... She reached for his hand. Sarah wouldn't want this. She wouldn't want you hiding. She wouldn't want you being invisible. You don't know that. I do know that. Eleanor squeezed his hand. She called me, you know, the night before she died. Marcus went cold. What? She called me. She was scared not of the birth but of losing you. She said you were pulling away, getting lost in the missions. She said she was afraid you'd forget how to come home. She never told me that. She didn't want to burden you. She knew what you were doing was important. Eleanor's eyes were wet. But she made me promise something. What? She made me promise that if anything happened to her, I would remind you who you really are. Not Shadow 7, not the hero. Just Marcus, the man she fell in love with. Marcus couldn't breathe. Why didn't you ever tell me this? Because you weren't ready to hear it. You were too deep in grief, too lost in guilt. Eleanor's voice softened. But now, Marcus, now you're ready. Ready for what? Ready to live again. She released his hand. That man on the news, the one who accused you of being a fraud, he was wrong. But not in the way you think. Marcus frowned. What do you mean? You are a fraud, Marcus, but not the kind he meant. You've been pretending to be ordinary, pretending to be invisible, hiding behind a janitor's uniform so no one would see who you really are. Her eyes locked onto his. That's the fraud. That's the lie, and it's time to stop. Mama, listen to me. Her voice was urgent now, fighting against the weakness in her body. I don't have much time, days, maybe hours, but before I go, I need to know that you're going to be okay. I need to know that you're going to stop punishing yourself. I need to know that Lily is going to grow up with a father who isn't afraid to be himself. Tears were streaming down Marcus's face. I don't know how. Yes, you do. Eleanor smiled. You just landed an airplane with no hydraulics and one engine on fire. You figured that out. You can figure this out too. That was different. No, it wasn't. It was the same thing. You saw a problem, you stopped being afraid, and you did what needed to be done. She touched his face. That's who you are, Marcus. That's always been who you are. Stop pretending otherwise. Marcus broke. The tears came, not the quiet, controlled tears he'd learned to hide, but real tears. Ugly tears. The tears of 15 years of grief and guilt and isolation. He laid his head on his mother's bed and sobbed. And Eleanor held him just like she'd done when he was a child, when he'd scraped his knee or lost a baseball game or come home crying because the other kids had made fun of his second-hand clothes. She held him and let him cry. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. "I'm so proud of the man you've become, and Sarah would be too. She is too. I know she's watching." "I miss her, Mama. I miss her so much." "I know, baby, I know." They stayed like that for a long time, mother and son holding on to each other as the night crept toward dawn. At some point, Marcus fell asleep. He dreamed of Sarah. They were flying together, not in a fighter jet, but in something soft and bright, something that felt like a memory. She was laughing. That laugh he'd loved so much, that laugh he'd forgotten how to hear. "Wake up, Marcus." Her voice was gentle. "It's time to wake up." He opened his eyes. Sunlight was streaming through the hospital window. Lily was standing next to him, her face streaked with tears. "Daddy?" Marcus sat up instantly. "What's wrong? What happened?" "Grandma won't wake up." Marcus turned to the bed. Eleanor's eyes were closed, her chest was still. Her face was peaceful, more peaceful than he'd seen it in years. She was gone. "No." Marcus grabbed her hand. It was cold. "No, no, no. Mama, wake up." "Daddy, is Grandma dead?" Marcus couldn't answer. He pulled his daughter close and held her as the tears came again. His mother was gone, but her last words echoed in his mind louder than grief, stronger than loss. "Stop pretending. Stop hiding. Be who you really are." He looked down at Lily, at her tear-streaked face, at the trust in her eyes. "Daddy," she whispered. "What do we do now?" Marcus took a breath. "We go home, baby." "But we don't have a home." "We have an apartment." Marcus smiled through his tears. "Then we make one. Together." He picked up his daughter and carried her out of the room. Behind them, Eleanor Webb lay in peace, a crumpled napkin drawing pressed against her heart. The picture of a father and daughter flying together through the sky. 3 months later. Marcus stood in front of the mirror in his small apartment, adjusting a tie he hadn't worn in 15 years. His hands were shaking. "Daddy, you're doing it wrong." Lily appeared beside him, still in her pajamas, her hair a wild mess of tangles. "I know," Marcus admitted. "I've forgotten how." "Let me try." She climbed onto the bathroom counter and grabbed the tie with both hands. Her tongue stuck out in concentration as she attempted to form a knot. "Where did you learn to tie a tie?" Marcus asked. "YouTube. I watched a video last night." Marcus laughed. "Of course you did." After 3 attempts, Lily produced something that vaguely resembled a Windsor knot. "There," she said proudly. "You look handsome." Marcus looked at himself in the mirror. The naval dress uniform fit perfectly. The Navy had sent someone to measure him personally. The medals on his chest caught the light. 4 rows of ribbons. The Distinguished Flying Cross, the Navy Cross, commendations he'd forgotten he'd earned. And soon, if he went through with this, the Medal of Honor. "Are you nervous?" Lily asked. "Terrified." "Why?" Marcus turned to face his daughter. "Because I've spent a long time being invisible, and today everyone's going to see me." Lily tilted her head. "Is that bad?" "I don't know yet. Grandma said you should stop hiding." The words hit Marcus like a wave. You heard that? I wasn't really asleep. Lily's eyes were serious, too serious for an 8-year-old. She said you were pretending to be ordinary. She said it was time to stop. Marcus knelt down to her level. What do you think, baby, should I stop pretending? Lily considered the question carefully. I think Grandma was right. I think you're not ordinary. I think you're special. She paused. But I also think you're still my daddy, even if you're special. Marcus pulled her into a hug. When did you get so smart? I was born smart. You just didn't notice because you were too busy mopping floors. He laughed, a real laugh, the kind he'd almost forgotten how to make. Come on, let's get you dressed. We have a plane to catch. Another plane, Lily groaned. Do you have to save this one too? I hope not. The flight to Washington was uneventful. Marcus spent most of it staring out the window, watching the clouds drift past. Lily sat beside him, reading a book about airplanes that someone at the Naval Academy had sent her. Daddy, yeah. It says here that the F-22 Raptor can fly at Mach 225. Is that true? It's true. Did you fly that fast? Sometimes. What does it feel like? Marcus thought about it. It feels like everything else disappeared. The ground, the sky, your problems, your fears, it all just melts away. There's nothing but you and the aircraft and the speed. It's the closest thing to freedom I've ever experienced. Lily looked at him with wonder. Do you miss it? Every day. Then why did you stop? Marcus took a breath. Because I loved something more than flying. What? You? Lily was quiet for a moment. That's really nice, Daddy. It's really true. She went back to her book, but Marcus noticed her wiping her eyes with her sleeve. The White House was overwhelming. Marcus had been inside twice before, once to receive the Navy Cross, once for a classified briefing he still couldn't talk about. But this was different. This time the cameras were everywhere, the press corps, the dignitaries, the weight of history pressing down on every moment. Mr. Webb, a young aide appeared at his elbow. The president would like to meet with you privately before the ceremony. Marcus looked at Lily. She can come too, the aide said quickly. The president specifically requested it. They followed the aide through corridors that Marcus remembered from another lifetime. Past paintings of former presidents, past Secret Service agents who stood like statues, past doors that led to rooms where the fate of the world was decided. Finally, they reached the Oval Office. The President of the United States stood as they entered. Marcus Webb. President Katherine Reynolds crossed the room and shook his hand. I've been looking forward to this. Madam President? And this must be Lily. The president knelt down. I've heard a lot about you, young lady. Lily looked at her father uncertainly. It's okay, baby. She's a friend. Hi, Lily said quietly. Hi yourself. The president smiled. I heard you made a drawing of your daddy flying the plane. Is that true? Lily nodded. I gave it to Grandma. She took it to heaven. The president's eyes glistened. That's beautiful. She stood and looked at Marcus. You've raised an extraordinary daughter. She raised herself mostly. That's not what I hear. The president gestured toward a pair of sofas. Please sit. We have a few minutes before the ceremony. They sat. Lily immediately began examining everything in the room with wide eyes. I wanted to talk to you before we go out there, the president said, to explain why this matters. With respect, ma'am, I know why it matters. I've read the history. I understand the significance. I'm not talking about the medal. The president leaned forward. I'm talking about you, your story, what it means to people. Marcus frowned. What do you mean? I've received over 50,000 letters in the past 3 months. 50,000. All of them about you. The president paused. Fathers who felt invisible. Single parents who thought no one saw them. Veterans who walked away from service and spent years feeling like they'd abandoned something essential. Her voice softened. You gave them hope, Marcus. You showed them that it's never too late to become who you were meant to be. Marcus didn't know what to say. I'm not a symbol, ma'am. I'm just a man who got lucky. No. The president's voice was firm. You're a man who made choices, hard choices. You chose your daughter over your career. You chose anonymity over glory. And when the moment came, you chose to step up and save lives. She smiled. That's not luck. That's character. A knock at the door. Madam President, it's time. The president stood. Are you ready? Marcus looked at Lily. She gave him a thumbs up. Yeah, he said. I'm ready. The East Room was packed. Every seat was filled. Cameras lined the walls. The press corps occupied the front rows, their equipment humming and clicking. Marcus walked through the crowd with Lily's hand in his, feeling every eye on them. He recognized faces. General Hayes, Captain Morris, Senator Elizabeth Chen, Colonel David Chen still wearing his flight suit standing at attention with the other members of Phantom Squadron. And in the front row, someone he hadn't expected. Amanda, the flight attendant. She caught his eye and smiled a small apologetic smile that said more than words ever could. Marcus nodded at her. Some wounds heal slowly, but they heal. They reached the front of the room. An aide guided Lily to a seat next to Captain Morris, who leaned down and whispered something that made her giggle. Marcus stood alone before the podium. The president took her place behind the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered here today to honor an extraordinary American. The room fell silent. 3 months ago, Flight 2147 from Washington to San Antonio experienced a catastrophic mechanical failure at 30,000 feet. Both engines were compromised. The hydraulic systems failed. The co-pilot was incapacitated. The president paused. 237 passengers faced certain death. Marcus felt his heart pounding. But among those passengers was a man named Marcus Webb, a man who for 15 years had worked as a janitor at Reagan National Airport, a man who had sacrificed a legendary military career to raise his daughter as a single father, a man who had chosen invisibility over recognition, service over glory. The president turned to look at Marcus. When his country needed him, Marcus Webb didn't hesitate. He walked into that cockpit and performed what engineers have called the most remarkable emergency landing in aviation history. Zero hydraulics, one engine on fire, visibility near zero, and he brought every single person on that plane safely to the ground. A murmur rippled through the crowd. For this extraordinary act of courage and for a lifetime of service to his country, it is my honor to present Marcus Webb with the Medal of Honor. An aide stepped forward carrying a small blue box. The president opened it, revealing a gold star hanging from a light blue ribbon. Marcus Webb, on behalf of a grateful nation, I present you with the Medal of Honor. May your example inspire generations to come. She lifted the medal and placed it around his neck. The weight of it was surprising. Such a small thing to carry so much meaning. The room erupted in applause. Marcus stood there frozen as the cameras flashed and the crowd cheered. He looked for Lily. She was standing on her chair, clapping so hard, her hands were red, tears streaming down her face. "That's my daddy!" she shouted. "That's my daddy!" The crowd laughed. The applause grew louder, and Marcus felt something shift inside him. The armor he'd built, the walls he'd constructed, the careful invisibility he'd maintained for 15 years. It was gone. He was visible now, and for the first time in a long time, that didn't feel like a curse. It felt like freedom. The ceremony ended, but the day didn't. There were hands to shake, photos to take, interviews to dodge. Marcus moved through it all in a daze, Lily never leaving his side. Finally, as the sun began to set, they found themselves alone in a quiet corridor. "Daddy." "Yeah, baby. What happens now?" Marcus looked at his daughter, at the medal around his neck, at the uniform he'd thought he'd never wear again. "I don't know," he admitted. "Everything's different now. Different good or different bad, just different." He knelt down. "But I promise you one thing, no matter what happens, you and me, we stick together. Okay? Okay. No more secrets, no more hiding. Whatever comes next, we face it together." Lily threw her arms around his neck. "I love you, Daddy. I love you too, baby, more than anything." A voice interrupted them. "Shadow 7. Marcus turned. Colonel David Chen stood at the end of the corridor, still in his flight suit. His eyes were red, his face tight with emotion. "David, 15 years. Chen walked toward him slowly. 15 years and not a word, not a call, not a letter. I thought you were dead. We all thought you were dead. I know, I'm sorry." "Sorry," Chen's voice cracked. "You were my best friend, my brother, and you just disappeared. I had to. Why?" "Because of Sarah, because of the guilt." Chen was standing in front of him now. "You think you're the only one who's lost someone. You think you're the only one who's ever had to choose between duty and family." Marcus said nothing. "I named my son after you," Chen continued. "Marcus David Chen, because I wanted him to grow up knowing that heroes are real. That there are men in this world who will do the impossible to protect the people they love." His voice broke, and then you vanished. And I had to explain to my son that sometimes heroes just disappear. "David, shut up. I'm not finished." Chen grabbed Marcus's shoulders. "I spent 15 years mourning you. 15 years wondering what I did wrong. 15 years thinking that if I'd just been a better friend, maybe you wouldn't have left. It wasn't about you. I know that now, but I didn't know it then." Chen's grip tightened. "Do you have any idea what it was like watching you on that news footage? Realizing that the janitor who saved 237 lives was the same man I'd flown 100 missions with. I can imagine." "No, you can't." Chen's eyes were fierce. "You can't imagine the pride, the relief, the anger, the joy, all of it hitting me at once." "I'm sorry. Stop apologizing." Chen pulled him into a hug. "Just promise me you won't disappear again." Marcus hugged him back. "I promise." They stood there for a long moment, two old friends reconnecting after 15 years of silence. Finally, Chen pulled back. "There's someone else who wants to see you." "Who?" Chen smiled. "Follow me." They walked through the White House corridors until they reached a small room off the main hall. Inside, surrounded by Secret Service agents, sat a woman Marcus hadn't seen in 2 decades. Vice Admiral Sarah Chen, David's wife, and Marcus suddenly remembered the new commandant of the Naval Academy. "Marcus Webb," she stood as he entered. "You look old." "Thanks, you look exactly the same." "Liar." She crossed the room and hugged him. "It's good to see you. It's really, really good to see you." "Sarah, I know everything. David told me." She pulled back. "And I have a proposal for you." "A proposal?" "The Secretary of Defense mentioned a position at the Naval Academy, training the next generation of pilots." She paused. "I want you to take it." Marcus blinked. "What? We need you. The Academy needs you. The new pilots we're training, they're good, but they're missing something. They've got the skills, the training, the technology, but they don't have the soul." Her eyes locked onto his. "You have the soul, Marcus. You always did." "I've been out of the game for 15 years. Flying is like riding a bike. You don't forget. I have a daughter. I can't just... The Academy has excellent schools, housing, a community." Sarah smiled. "Lily would thrive there, and so would you." Marcus looked at David. Did you plan this? Maybe. You're both terrible. We learned from the best. Marcus looked at his daughter, who was watching the exchange with curious eyes. What do you think, baby? You want to live on a naval base? Lily's face lit up. Would I get to see airplanes every day? Every day. Would you be flying them? Marcus hesitated. Sarah Chen answered for him. Eventually. Once he remembers how. Lily grabbed Marcus's hand. Say yes, Daddy. Please say yes. Marcus looked at the faces around him. David, who had never stopped being his brother. Sarah, who was offering him a chance at redemption. The Secret Service agents pretending not to listen. The president's portrait on the wall watching over everything. He thought about his mother, about her last words, about the promise he'd made to stop hiding. He thought about Sarah, his Sarah, and what she would want for him. He thought about Lily and the life she deserved. Yes, he said. David whooped. Sarah grinned. Lily jumped up and down, and Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in 15 years. Hope, 6 months later. Marcus stood on the tarmac at the Naval Academy watching a squadron of training jets take off into the morning sky. Lily stood beside him, her hand in his, her eyes tracking the aircraft as they climbed. That one's crooked, she observed. Marcus laughed. That's Ensign Patterson. He's still learning. You should teach him better. I'm trying. The jets disappeared into the clouds, leaving vapor trails that slowly dissolved into the blue. Daddy? Yeah, baby. Are you happy? Marcus looked at his daughter, at the Naval Academy behind them, at the world he'd finally allowed himself to rejoin. Yeah, baby, I'm happy. Good. Lily squeezed his hand. Mama would be happy too, and Grandma. Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. How do you know? Because they're watching. They're always watching. Lily pointed at the sky. See those trails? That's them, making sure we're okay. Marcus looked up at the fading vapor trails. Maybe she was right. Maybe they were watching. A young cadet jogged up to them, slightly out of breath. Commander Webb, sir, you're needed in the briefing room. What's the situation? New class of recruits just arrived. They're asking for you specifically. For me? The cadet grinned. They want to learn from Shadow 7, sir. Marcus looked at Lily. She smiled. Go, Daddy. They need you. He knelt down and kissed her forehead. I'll be back for dinner. You better. We're having spaghetti. Your spaghetti or my spaghetti? Mine. Yours is terrible. Marcus laughed. He stood, straightened his uniform, and walked toward the briefing room. Behind him, the sun rose over the Naval Academy, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Ahead of him, a room full of young pilots waited to learn from a legend. And for the first time in 15 years, Marcus Webb walked without hiding, without pretending. Without fear. He was Shadow 7. He was a father. He was finally completely himself, and that was enough. That was everything. The man who had been invisible in seat 12F had finally learned the truth his mother had tried to teach him. The truth his wife had known all along, the truth his daughter had never doubted. Some heroes wear medals. Some heroes wear uniforms. But the truest heroes are the ones who show up every single day for the people who need them most. Marcus Webb had spent 15 years being invisible, but he had never stopped being a hero. And now at last the world could see him. Not Shadow 7 the legend, not the janitor, the invisible man. Just Marcus, a father who loved his daughter, a pilot who had found his way home, a man who had finally learned that the greatest act of courage isn't saving 237 strangers on a plane. It's letting yourself be seen. It's letting yourself be loved. It's choosing every single day to be exactly who you are. Marcus Webb made that choice, and he never looked back. The end.